like it'll all like the rules exist in a way so that agents can provide excellent client service to their clients. Well, if
Mhm.
that's the overall culture of our industry, the rules become less of an issue, right? Because
That's
here's
a
the thing,
that's
we
the
all
future.
know, we all know the unethical scumbags, right? The agents know that better than anybody else because they have to deal with them, in a transaction. Like, oh, that motherfucker is just he's screwing his client over. Oh, that's unethical. Like, what the hell? Like, we all know. Like, we're not talking about some minor little on the fringe this or that. We're talking about people who are like really like screwing their clients over, right?
Mhm.
We know that. And I think we'll be able to deal with that. We'll be able to get around. I think the marketplace will punish them. Right? Because something that people don't think about a lot is once NAR membership is no longer like a big de facto thing, because I think it's really going to go away, right? I think good 70% of the agents will stop being realtor members because as long as you can get the MLS and the MLSs will make it possible for them to do that, right? All right. Because that's already a trend we're seeing.
Mhm.
Something that people don't think about is why don't agents talk shit about each other, right? Well, big part of it is Article 15 of the Code of Ethics that says you can't, basically you can't badmouth another realtor. Otherwise, you get brought up on charges and then you lose MLS access and all this stuff. It's all interlinked. Okay, well, if you're no longer a realtor, you're not subject to that. And if you know that the agent is really screwing their client, what stops you from calling that client and say, hey, your agent's screwing you. You should list with me instead.
Hmm.
Well, yeah,
We have
you're
rules
right.
against that too, but
But as far as NAR not being in existence, without NAR, I mean, Julie and I were back when the real estate market imploded in 07 and 08. We were on we helped the industry learn how to do short sales. It
Hmm.
was kind of our coming out, really. It's when our business really took off. And we worked directly with a lot of the servicers and the lenders, and we had conversations with the FDIC and the
Yep.
whole thing. And Julie and I had this call he was a guy that worked at NAR, and he was telling us a story about there was a meeting happening over at the FDIC, and he wasn't invited. He found out about this meeting, and the meeting turned out to be basically all the head bank guys, not the
Yep.
CEOs, but and the
Yep.
bank guys had gotten together with the FDIC because the FDIC was going to control the unraveling of a lot of the mortgage
Yep.
stuff. It's a mess. And the concept was that the banks were going to then start dictating to the agents what the commissions were going to be.
Right.
So the banks were going to start being in control of what all the REO co-op and listing agent commissions were going to be, which you can imagine what that number would be.
Right.
And he found out about it and basically was essentially in that particular case, if his story is to be believed, which I believe it's true,
Right.
basically saved real estate commissions, not just for the sake of the REOs, but probably going forward, because that would have been a sea change to the expectation as far as the listing commission would have been. And if you look at the amount of work that NAR has done historically, I'm not so sure recently, but historically, protecting the industry, there's so many examples of things that they have done to,
Sure.
and so with no NAR lobbying in Washington, I don't think there would be much of an industry left because there's the banks, which would be still lobbying, would eat us alive. And who knows who else?
Possibly. I mean, look, I don't want to see NAR destroyed. People really have a misperception. And I guess maybe it's because I say like NAR needs to be burned to the ground, and built back
Why
up.
would
could
they
be
think that,
related.
Rob?
No, but here's the thing, like the important part is to build back up, right? And I think people know me and have been listening and reading me for a while. Like they understand the reason why I stay in real estate is because the NAR Code of Ethics, the preamble to it, right? Like, hey man, if you're not inspired by that document, like I feel like you shouldn't be in this industry, right? Where it talks about
100%.
all under also land, it talks about civic responsibility, it talks about patriotic duty. Like the founders of NAR really understood the importance of real estate, of home ownership, of the land to everything, to like functioning of civilization, right? I genuinely think that the founders of NAR were genuinely patriotic men, and unfortunately it was all men because it was 1909, right? But like if we could just remember, go back to that, right? It's not about like how we protect the agent's commission. It's about how do we protect home ownership? How do we protect our cities? How do we protect our towns? How do we, like if we go back to that, then I think it's something that the world needs. It's something that the country needs. Like we talk about private property protection, and there are back in 2000, early 2000s when when that was under attack, NAR was the only organization that was really out there saying, hey man, private property matters, right? Like I would love for NAR to sort of go back to that. But the prerequisite of that to me is you can't have realtor members who don't know the first goddamn thing about any of those issues, right?
Mhm.
And we have like, I'm sorry, I would bet I would bet like $1,000 if we went into an average real estate office, a big one, say a big Keller Williams office, not that they're in the office, but and we just went around and asked the agents. So what issue is top of mind for you? What housing issue is top of mind for you? They would have no fucking clue. Hey, do you agree with NAR's position on this? They don't even know what that is, right? So a
Mhm.
lot of that has been lost primarily because of the success of NAR, right? And the success of NAR then led to its control of the MLS, which then led to this lock-in effect. The vast majority of NAR members are not members, they're hostages, right? And I think I want to get rid of that. I would like to see that change. And I think the change that we're going through will get to there. So what then emerges to me is a new type of new NAR that's maybe a lot smaller, maybe 10, 15% of current membership, but that's a lot more focused on the great things that NAR brings to the table, right? On under also land, on professionalism, on going above and beyond what just
Mhm.
business requires, right? Where they're not spending all their time thinking about how do I make more TikTok videos to attract another lead, where they're spending a lot of their time thinking, oh shit, we really need to do something about home insurance rates, right? Not just
Meaningful
for
topics.
right, not just from my pocketbook, by the way, right? But because this affects my community, this affects my clients, that this affects home ownership. Here's just what's mind blowing for me is if I were like really NAR junkie, all that. Okay, what is the number one sort of societal political issue before us today? Okay, maybe not number one. One of the top five, I'll put it that way, right? It's the fact that housing is unaffordable. It's the fact
Mhm.
that young people cannot fucking buy a house, right? It's like young married couples. Like when I bought a house, I was 29, right? And my new wife and I at the time, we were like, okay, we're saving up, we're scrimping, and guess what? We could buy a house because it costs $180,000. That house today is 450. Like if that's not a problem that NAR is working on, like actively, and every realtor member should be like, that should be number one priority on our heads. What the fuck are we working on? Right? That's
Mhm.
part of the reform I want to see. And I think it will happen because of the settlement changes. And I think it will happen because of the political changes. I think it will happen because of social change. Now, what I would love to see, because I know you guys have thousands of people listen, what I would love to see is the rank and file member of NAR, right? If they decide I still believe in this, cool, express yourself, be heard, right? Like the NAR leadership, those people aren't leaders because nobody follows them, right? Well, then
Yeah.
if there's a group of people out there, it's like, hey, we need a leader, go find someone who then says, look, let me carry this message to the organization. And if we have to reform governance, then reform governance. It's a private organization. You don't have to pass a law, just reform governance. Do you know what I mean? Like, just do things over. And I think if we were to start doing that, things could be really, really great. Things could be really better. I actually think an NAR of 150,000 members, but all 150,000 members were like fire in the eyes, like real estate housing activists who genuinely gave a shit about all of these things. I think it would be more powerful in Washington. I really do, right?
You
Because
probably
imagine there was something out there that was really horrible for homeowner rights. Let's say it's housing affordability, something that's really important. And NAR said, hey, everybody, we need y'all to come to Washington for a big rally. And imagine 150,000 realtors show up on Capitol Hill to lobby for affordable housing. That would be hell of a lot more powerful than however many lobbyists are going and whining and dining, Congress critters or some, FDIC. You know what I mean? Like ultimately, power in this country is in the hands of the people. I think we've seen that, right? And if you stop pissing off half of your membership and got back to what we care about is housing, what we care about is under also land, what we care about is profession, what we care about is consumer protection. Yeah, like, Yo, I think it'll be a different world. And I do like to say this. I want to make this point over again. There's this fear in the industry that because I can't show my value because of this, I'm gonna go work for free and then I'm not gonna get paid. Like this, that's not the America I know. I just the American consumer is not an asshole. I believe that, right? And I say that because I'll go to a restaurant, I'll have dinner, and the server will be amazing. Like really, just made a delightful experience. I'm like 30% tip. You know what I mean? Like Americans aren't the type of people like, well, I don't have a written agreement with you, so therefore I'm going to screw you. Like that's just not what I believe is going to happen. Translate to the larger context. If NAR and realtors as a whole were out there authentically, actively working for the good of the country, good of the community, good of society as a whole, like doing what the preamble says we're supposed to do, I don't think the American people are going to sit there and be like, fuck you people. I just don't. I think they'd be like, thank you for doing that. Because, you know, I don't pay a lot of attention to how zoning laws are affecting my property rights or my ability for my children to buy a home, you know, in my neighborhood. I don't pay attention to that. Thank you for paying attention to it and doing something about it. I genuinely believe that because I think Americans are good people. That's what it comes down to. And if we could stop being so afraid of this or trying to control like every little thing, like just get back to like being human and being citizens, being Americans, being neighbors and being realtors. And if you took that mindset, why wouldn't you go pick up as much skill as you could? Do you know what I mean? Like, why
We're in
would you
the,
take,
you're
like, why wouldn't
preaching
you
to the
spend your
choir.
spare time reading about zoning laws in your area, see how that affects, you know, your clients versus let me make another fucking whatever TikTok video. Like, you know what I mean? Like this notion of local expert, like, yeah, if you're a true local expert, that's amazing value. But so much of it comes down to, I know this restaurant. Like, that's not a local expert. That's Yelp. You know, like, we don't need another restaurant reviewer. We need somebody who really understands how water rights are going to affect your property values or how this, whatever regulation that your local township just passed about having bamboo in your backyard is actually going to screw you over. Like, we need more of that.
Actual value.
So I have a question for you since you walked into the minefield.
Yeah.
So you said make housing more affordable. How would you make housing more affordable? And I'm going to take the easy one, by making Fannie and Freddie private again, which is definitely going to happen under Trump.
No, you know, I have crazy ideas and I've already written about it. But broadly speaking, my idea basically is to convert all real estate investors into real estate mortgage investors. Right. In other words, make it very, very unattractive to own a property for investment purposes and make it very, very attractive to allow other people to buy property.
Well,
and I know you guys are probably real estate investors. Probably you hate the idea. So
no,
put it simply, right?
but because you're picking a political scab, and I'd be surprised if you didn't know this. But what percent, and when you say real estate investors, what percent of institutional investors?
2%, 3%. No, I mean
Exactly.
individuals.
It's
No, I
nothing.
mean like, yeah.
Yeah, but this was a political thing that a lot of people got manipulated over, and I know you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
like, you know, all BlackRock and all these other, you know, evil bastards are buying up all the houses. Completely bullshit. Not even
Complete horseshit. Total. No, you're
Yeah.
exactly right.
And
No,
the
I'm
reason
talking about harming individual investors. No question
right,
about it.
well, but and yes, we do have rental properties, but the reason that the rental people need to be buying rental properties for people to live in, because not everybody wants to be or will afford to be or should be a property owner. That's why. And if there weren't individual investors purchasing properties, then where would those people live? Oh, I know, government housing.
Yeah, so like I said, I've written about it, and it's a fairly complicated thing. But basically, it was making it where if you're investing in purchase mortgages, right, making all of that gain tax free, right? Because the margins from being like the annual cash flows from bringing investor is actually not that high, right? It's maybe 8% a year, right?
That's
So
about right.
I'm saying if you could make 8% entirely tax free versus 8% that's taxed
No,
in
that's a
normal,
good idea. That's a good idea.
that's kind of the idea, right? Was to try and then of course we got to figure out financially how to make that happen.
That's a great idea, Rob.
Right. But that's one of my ideas. The idea that I will actually borrow and I just wrote a book review about this. Brian Kaplan, who's an economist, so he has put this forward, and I didn't study, he did. It sounds really compelling. Is if we just deregulate housing, we will make housing affordable.
Totally.
Right. just deregulate housing. I'm planning on doing a series actually on my blog and my personal podcast when I start back up. But I want to talk to builders, right? Just ask them, why can't you build affordable housing? I guarantee the answer is almost always going to be regulation,
Yeah,
zoning law,
that would be
environmental regs,
fascinating.
right? This reg, that reg, this, that, and the other thing. If we just deregulated housing, I actually think we'll make it affordable very quickly. But
We
that
are
you can
this,
say that about the economy as a whole. If we just deregulated the economy, if we just got the government off our backs, we'll take care of it, man. I really believe that, right? So I think ultimately the housing solution will be that, right? If we just deregulate, just made it less of a fucking pain in the ass to build new housing or to convert old housing into, like, I think we'll be fine. I think we'll take care of it, you know?
well, we have a friend actually starting a fund. He's raising money to make it so that the idea is the company will give you all or part of your down payment. Obviously, you have to qualify. Then they
Mhm.
take an equity position in the
Yep.
house. You don't have to pay. This concept's been around, but it's kind of interesting. So for the
Yep.
sake of the listeners, basically, that's the gist of it. You go to this investor, you'd have to have good credit and, be viable.
Sure.
And then you wouldn't pay them anything. They would provide your down payment, maybe even the mortgage to Rob's idea.
Right.
And then they get a percent of the equity when you go to sell the house. You
Right.
sell the house whenever the hell you want to sell the house. They're not in control of that. They're just getting a piece on the upside.
Right. I mean, look, maybe I'll ask you guys as an investor because I only have like short-term rental investment products. Doesn't really apply. Like if you look at the cash flow, from one of your investment properties, and if you could convert that to a seller finance mortgage that was matching or exceeding whatever your cash flow expectation was, except it's tax-free, wouldn't you consider it? Of course you
Definitely.
would. Because then you know that the renter went from being a tenant to an owner. And you know that person, that family's gonna take care of the property way better. They're not gonna be calling you up like, "Hey, my whatever shower broke," and well, it's because you were flushing beer down the toilet, like, whatever it is, right? They're not gonna abuse because it's now theirs, right?
Yeah.
And all you've done is converted your ownership of the house into ownership of the mortgage underlying it. And by the way, if they fail to pay, guess what? You can foreclose and
Well, but you're getting into something else. The foreclosure laws in some states are just the insane.
really correct. But
You
how do
can
they
never get.
compare to tenant rep laws as well, right? So
Yeah,
there's
exactly.
it's far complicated, and we can get into a lot more fascinating conversations about it. No one is actually proposing doing this of any importance. I'm the only one who's written this, and everyone's like, "Yeah, right, Rob, I get it." So the better solution is let's just deregulate as much as possible.
Well, I am curious what your take on the Fannie Freddie coming out of conservatorship is. If you haven't studied it, that's fine. But
I mean, I haven't really studied it, but as a general matter, as a libertarian, I'm like Fannie and Freddie are an abomination, right? Like we can't have private gains and public losses. Do you know what I'm saying? Like that just doesn't make any sense to me. So I would rather just get rid of them, quite honestly, but maybe there's some economists like, Rob, you're crazy, which is fine. Let's have that conversation. So
all
yeah,
right, Jules,
this
you have
is a
something
fun
in
con.
mind?
Well, I also am fascinated with new construction and all the different aspects of that. There's a new construction podcast I listen to that
Hmm.
they don't publish that much, but that is pretty interesting.
Yeah,
What do you think about things like the 3D printed houses and Elon Musk's $10,000 house and just
sure.
different types of housing to address the affordability issue?
I think they're all great. I think we should try it all, right? Um, but like I said, my obsession with this, and I think we all should be obsessed about it, is how do I put this? I think money, our corrupt money, the fiat money system is actually the root of all problems. But the place where it shows up most is housing. So to me, it's sort of like this. You fix money, then you fix housing. If you fix housing, you fix everything else. I actually sort of believe this. And Brian Kaplan, I mentioned, goes into it, right? The income inequality in our country comes from housing, right? A lot of the crime problems we have comes from housing, right? The and we in real estate are the ones who should know this the best. We talk about housing being the greatest wealth creator, and how neighborhoods where you have more homeowners take care of themselves better, right? Like I absolutely agree with all of that. Okay, given that, we need to incentivize ownership way more, way more. If that means, you know what, you just graduated college, you're making $35,000 a year, you really can't afford, fine, buy this $10,000 Elon Musk house, but where you own it. And it's on a little strip of land, but you own it. Because if you own it, then you're going to take care of it better. You're going to care more about the community you're in, right? And then we just have to make it a lot easier for people to buy and sell houses, right? Because, okay, I had this $10,000 house for 2 years and I made more money and now I want to move up. We just have to make it easier for them to say, cool, I'm going to put it on the market and it's sold in a week, as opposed to being some 90-day drawn out, fucked up process with all the rules. And that's the other thing we don't talk about, right? Think about how many rules and regs that the real estate industry, that the transactions, that brokers and agents are wrapped up in. Why, right? Can we take a look at that? Do we really need that many rules, right? Do we really need, like, you guys bought and sold in California? Like, what's a closing package in California look like? Like, how big
Epic.
is a stack of papers, right? Like, do we really need that? Because back in like the 60s, I saw,
I have my grandparents' contract from
right,
1923.
right,
It's one page. It was owner financing with a balloon. That
right,
was it.
right. Well, I mean, and were people just getting ripped off left and right in the 20s and 30s and
I
40s?
don't think
I
so.
just, no, we had the American dream. Like, what's happening? So can we maybe take a look at that? If we were to do all of those things, 3D printed houses would be great. Like, let's see what technology can do, right? But fundamentally, it really is about we deciding as a nation, I think, that affordable housing is really important. Because without that, I really think the reason why our birth rates have fallen so low is directly related to the cost of housing.
That's probably true.
Directly,
That
right?
makes sense.
So I'm like, fix
Yep.
housing, we can fix so many ills, right? And who then should take the lead in fixing housing if not realtors, right? If not
Excellent
us,
point.
right? And I think that, and again, if you go back to like the vision, the preamble, that it calls realtors to do that. Fantastic. It doesn't mean, screw your business. It doesn't mean any of those things. Like the business still has to go on. We all have to make money. We all have to do all of that. But the way to do that, we already kind of know. It's going to be get skills, right? And then build relationships, become important in your community, and it will happen. And of course, you got to do lead gen. Of course, you have to advertise. Like, I'm not saying keep it a secret that you're a realtor. Of course, you're going to do all of those things, but everyone understands that. Everybody advertises, everybody does lead gen, right? Lawyers do lead gen, believe me. It's just what are we emphasizing? What's important to us, right?
There is a historical precedent for what you're proposing with regards to building, really putting emphasis, behind affordable housing. It happened after World War II.
Sure,
I grew up in a neighborhood where the houses were all Sears homes, and Julie and I
sure,
started selling real estate in a community where there was a guy that lived down the street from us that returned from World War II, and the house was delivered to the local railroad tracks. And it was a Sears house. When you got done looking
right,
at the bras and all the things the Sears catalog used to, you go to the housing section, you order the house, you add this
right.
name, showed up, your buddies, the pickup showed up, and you build it on the lot that you got
Yep,
as maybe for free or a huge discount from the VA. That's
yep.
what's going to have to happen again. And
I
we're very
agree.
optimistic because, if you look at, for example, obviously Starlink and some of the other technologies that are coming around, people don't have to live in these very congested, expensive, overpriced, crime-ridden
Agree.
places. They can live adjacent to it,
Yeah.
and that's what's going to happen. Otherwise, there is going to always be a shortage of housing.
Like I said, man, I think if we just got the government off our backs,
Mhm.
we will figure it out. Like American, ingenuity, American innovation. Like you said, Starlink. No, like people are still talking about we need fiber and we need to blah. I'm like, just how about we just buy a bunch of Starlink? Can we skip over a generation of technology? That's an American, right? That's American technology. So I guess fundamentally, I look at it as let's have a little bit more patience. What we need to do is get all the rules, all the government, all the barriers out the way, right? And even in real estate, I think one of the things about the settlement, if you think about it a different way, what it did is it got rid some of the NAR rules out the way. And we'll see what the end result of that is. I think what we're going to find is end result is greater professionalism, more money being made by better agents, which doesn't hurt my feelings. I think that's great. Um, and the industry will figure out a way, a pathway for newer agents, less experienced agents to become more experienced agents. And quite frankly, maybe get some of the people out who really shouldn't be in the industry. They are, and here's the thing, they would actually be happier they would add value to the community if they were doing something else other than trying to sell reels,
That's
like
true.
one deal a year, you know?
So what did Elon was calling them surplus elites. There needs to be a, when there's 80% of the Twitter.
Right.
Yeah. So I wonder what it's going to be called in the industry if what you're foreshadowing comes true, not surplus elites, but surplus something else.
Maybe. I mean, look, I don't know, but they're gonna do something else, right?
Yeah.
They'll find a way to add value some other way, other than helping a family with the most important purchase or sale of their lives. You know, like honestly, leave that up to, people with some skills, right? And in the meantime, gain the skills so you could become one of those people. And brokers and institutions then to create that pathway for those people who genuinely want to be to get there, right?
Mhm.
And like I said, man, look, I came out of the legal industry. The thing was you're gonna do 7 years as an associate, right? Working for somebody else. You're an employee. You listen to the partner. You work for the firm, right? You're a wage slave, and you're going to work 80 hours, 100 hours. You're going to do whatever the partner tells you to do. During those 7 years, you're going to learn an enormous amount. You're going to pick up all kinds of skills. And then you are going to be allowed to go, service clients. Like you're then going to be expected to go and get your own clients because you're now someone with some real skills, right? Why can we apply that? Because during those 7 years, man, your income is guaranteed. You can make a living.
I mean, Rob, that's in essence what we do. I mean, hire people, teams, brokers, hire Julie and I and our coaches to basically do exactly what you're saying.
Right. Right.
And it is fascinating though, I'll just tell you from a different perspective than maybe what you're considering. So Julie and I are out in the landscaping selling coaching, and we're not going to change our messaging. We're always going to be about what we've talked about, for the
Sure.
last hour. And we're never going to basically try to, conflate the idea that an earned reputation is the same as a brand. We're not going to do it.
Right.
And we're not going to tell agents to basically do all this, all these shenanigans, try to gather attention to yourself. We want you to do what you don't want to do, and you don't want to do it at the highest level, and earn the right to be of service to other people. And if
Right.
you're failing, it's because you haven't earned that right yet. But we don't get invited to a lot of parties because of that, especially ones that are being sponsored by the marketing and lead generation and the CRM and the
Sure. Sure.
They don't really like us.
No, but here's the I don't you think there's been a real shift, especially since Tuesday, right? I mean, if there's a lesson to be taken away from what happened on Tuesday, to me, is you're far better to be authentic and be an authentic asshole than you are to be a fake brand, of like, do you know what I'm saying?
God, I
Like,
hope you're right.
no,
Honestly.
I genuinely think like, look, I mean, I have a reputation of being an asshole, but I come by pretty honestly, right? This is authentically who I am, you know? I'm not gonna say one thing to you all and then say something else altogether if I'm on some different like no, I'm not interested in catering to other people's impressions. I'm not interested in building a brand. Do you know what I mean? Like my interest is in like this is who I am. I'll be happy to be wrong. So this is one of my things. If you listen to industry relations, right? I'm happy to be wrong, but I'm not gonna blow smoke up your ass. Do you know what I mean? If I'm wrong, I'll just you know what? I was wrong. Turns out I was wrong about that. That was a mistake. I think we're way better off. And I think going forward, and every successful, like really top producing successful agents I know, they're all authentic. All of them are genuinely authentic. If they're nice, it's because they're genuinely nice people. If they're funny, it's because they're genuinely authentically funny people. They don't go and like study jokes to tell. Like they don't do that. Do you know what I mean? If they're if they're pricks, guess what? They're genuinely pricks, but they're pricks for you. They do that thing. Like, yeah, I'm a prick, but I'm gonna be a prick
They
for
channel
you.
it.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
That's their routine.
right. I think that's going to start happening. And quite frankly, all of the branding, like where it becomes helpful is there a way to channel your authentic self into a brand, into a promise? Sure, that could be helpful. But does it matter one fucking bit what the logo on your business like nobody cares. I'm sorry, nobody cares about the color of your brokerage sign. Nobody cares, right? What they care about is your earned reputation, right? About the authentic self, that you're bringing to the table. And I think that's the age we're entering.
I
That's the
hope.
age we're entering. I hope so too.
It does feel like the pendulum swung all the way to one side,
Right.
and just one freaking day swung all the way to the other. And
I
trust
yeah.
me when I tell you, Julie and I pray that what you're saying is true.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope so too. I could be wrong. Like I said, I'm happy to be wrong. I just not to win.
But look at all the things we talked about and how much of our conversation over the past couple of hours has focused on deregulation,
Yep.
being authentic, getting back to core values,
Yep.
being professional,
Yep.
showing your value because you have value.
Yep.
I mean, I think that's kind of if we saw anything on Tuesday, maybe that is the collective unconscious of the country. And that gets back to the American dream too. And
I
that's
think
all
so.
about housing.
I totally think so. And I think we have a really important role to play in the story as we go forward. Like I said, if we don't fix housing, we can't fix any of our problems. We have to fix housing, right? Okay, well, how do we fix housing? We could get into all the conversation around it. But I don't need people to agree with me on this. Let's have that debate. And this is why, going all the way back to our first topic, why the speech code was so horrendous, right? Because then let's have people disagree, like really disagree about what the right thing to do for housing affordability is, right? But then let's have that debate and let's be authentic about what we genuinely believe. And then in that conflict, we're probably gonna get the right answer. I mean, like I might not be right, you might not be right, but as we're talking to each other, like we might get to kind of something that's close to the right answer. Future of the MLS, maybe I'm wrong, but let's have the conversation. And one thing I will say for the last 4 years, we have not been willing to have some real hard conversations in our industry for
Why?
sure.
But why, Rob?
Political correctness, wokeism, I don't know, the censorship, thing. Like NAR definitely punishes people for having heretical views. You know this, I know this, we all know this, right? Like, I think I'm pretty influential in terms of the industry as a whole. Am I speaking at NAR Next going on right now? No. Would they ever invite me? No. We know that, right? But why not? Like, there was an event I was at, and they invited Stephen Brobeck from the Consumer Federation, and the agent's like, "Brr." I'm like, why? Why wouldn't you want to hear from him? Right? Just because he disagrees with you, right? When did that culture come out? When did Americans become those people, right? Whereas, like, to me, being an American always meant, hey, man, you could have whatever opinion you want, right? As long as I get to then take you down too, right? And we can fight, like, right? I mean, that's the
That's what
American
college
way,
was supposed to be
right?
back in the day. You went to college to have these discourses and
Right,
learn more and learn how people
right,
think. And
right.
now it's like everybody's afraid to say anything about
Safe
anything.
spaces and shit. Same
Yeah.
thing with realtors. Same thing with companies. Like, okay, let's move away from that. I think that's the overall zeitgeist. I think we just want authentic, sort of civil debate. Like nobody wants violence. Nobody wants to be fighting. Like I don't want to see like people punching each other out. But I wouldn't mind seeing a real like hearty debate about commission rates. That seems fine to me.
Should be okay.
Why not? Well, I would love to see a real conversation about what buyer agents should be doing or not be doing. Like how listing agents should be doing. Like, let's have it. Let's just have it all out without it becoming like this emotional, nasty, like you hate us or you hate that. Like, no, it's not. It's about trying to get to the same place. What's the same place? We're trying to service buyers and agents, buyers and sellers, renters and landlords. We're trying to solve the housing problem, which is one of the top 5 problems we have as a fucking country. And if you look at the preamble and you go under all the land, I have a civic responsibility and a patriotic duty for well-functioning cities. God damn it, let's get into that. If that's not inspiring, you shouldn't be in this business. I
Your
genuinely believe that.
your perspective is very optimistic, and I love
I
that.
am. I'm an optimist. I'm very white-pilled.
Yeah, you're very optimistic, and so are Julie and I. We went on a 6 mile walk this morning, and we were talking about all the reasons because we write podcast outlines in our head, when we're walking, and we were coming up with a list of the top. Like we said, well, let's come up with 5 reasons to believe that 2025 is going to be your best year ever in real estate.
Sure.
And like we went to like 30 reasons because there's so many reasons. All the things that you talked about, though, you did
Sure.
bring up some very interesting things I hadn't considered. Like Julie, he said what I thought was really fascinating was that the average first time buyer you now know is almost like in their late 30s.
Mhm.
And not even 10 years ago was in their late 20s. And I bet you that is directly correlated to the fact that a lot of people aren't having children until later in their lives too. That totally makes sense because they can't afford housing.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to have a kid in an apartment. I mean, that's not ideal. So that's fascinating. But yeah, I mean, honestly, there's so many reasons to believe that the wind is finally at the industry's back. Interest rates need to come down. Rob, do you think the real heart of the problem with housing right now is lack of inventory or interest rates? If you had to fix one and only one of those two problems, which would it be?
I think it'll be lack of inventory.
100% agree. Why are we the only three people on planet Earth to say that? Why does everyone else say interest rates?
I don't think everyone else says interest rates. I think the corporate press and the regime economists say that, right?
Mhm.
But the normal person, like, they want to make about interest rates. I'm like, no, it's about the price of the home, right? It's like, who cares what
Which
the
is driven
interest.
by lack of inventory.
Yeah.
Correct. Because we're not building enough thanks to all the overregulation. And
Mhm.
quite frankly, I don't know why this is controversial because we have 15 million people who shouldn't be here.
Yes.
I mean, I know that's super controversial. I'm like, all right, that's fine, except that supply and demand that's a law of economics. When you have 15 more million more people than should be here, and we built 1 million homes a year for the last, like, of course things are going to be high. So, we'll see.
You and your
We'll
damn
see.
logic.
What?
You
I
and your
know.
damn logic.
Well, again, that's really incorrect to say, and I'm a racist and I'm like, I'm an immigrant, and but okay, I guess I'm anti-immigrant. It's just fucking numbers, right? We only built 1.2 million homes a year, and we brought in 10 million new people. Like that's
We call that facting on the
yeah.
podcast.
Yeah.
So
We're going
of course,
fact.
inventory. Of course, it's inventory, and then the rates. Who cares?
Well, it's because again, agents don't know that, for example, you can 20% of all the loans, I think it's 23% are assumable with release because if they're FHA, the whole thing. And so you could walk into someone's existing mortgage for like no percent, cash them out of their equity, or maybe they give you a partial second mortage. All these
Sure.
things the industry have.
30% of deals are cash.
Sure.
Yeah.
But let's put it this way. Let's say I'm a 30-year-old, whatever, couple, and we get married. Well, we're not a baby. Let's go buy a house. Let's say rates were 15%. Okay. But houses were $150,000. We'd see 8 million transactions a year.
Oh, yeah. But the $150,000 house is like, we need to preface what you just said, because agents are going to freak out that you're a proponent of house values falling, which would trash the economy. These would be houses that would be newly constructed outside of the existing housing inventory. New stuff basically would be
I don't know. Like, would it crash the economy? Everyone says that. I'm not
it
sure.
would crash the economy.
How?
No, but see, I have a different philosophy on this. I think you can accomplish the reasonably priced house with a combination of deregulation, freeing up some of the federal lands that are way less
Of
expensive.
course.
And you add Starlink, which means you can live out further
Right.
and still be
Right.
functional.
Right.
Everybody's comfortable with working from home thanks to COVID. You could have some combination of those things.
Right.
Maybe you bring back the 40-year mortgage to stretch out the payments and get them down. You could have maybe they're not 150,000, but maybe you have a $300,000 respectable starter house in a decent community that has amenities, because maybe I hope that one of the things that the new, the new administration does is maybe we build 10 new cities. We have enough land.
Interesting.
You're
Yeah.
flown over Las Vegas?
I mean,
There's
I
less
live
there.
in, Nevada is almost entirely owned by federal. I think
You do that.
who the hell knows? The general sense that I have though is like, if home values were to fall, that would crash the economy. I don't know if that's true. In other words, if home values fall, but we have a lot more activity because of it, does that crash the economy?
No, it's because
But the
people,
problem is you wouldn't have more activity because people would lose their equity, which means they couldn't purchase because they couldn't put a down payment on what they wanted to buy. They
you
wouldn't-
wouldn't have anyone.
I think
you
we'd have
wouldn't
more
any-
action, but not
Yeah,
maybe.
who'd be want to be in the mortgage industry if basically you knew that there was a good chance that you're going to get wiped out on your, investment. So, yeah.
Again, there's probably complications. I'm just my gut feel like it's one of my posts that I wrote, as you guys saw, was if home values to fall, we, at least the real estate industry, I think could benefit from it because there's a lot more transactions, right? Because this was one of the stats that came out is that we're below 3.8 million annually, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, home prices are up. The median home price in America now is $450,000, but we're at 3.8 million. So the industry's getting absolutely fucking hammered, right? Aren't we better off if we go to 300,000 median home price, but we have 7 million transactions? I think we
Well,
are.
how are you exactly going to look at, I mean, in this communist manifesto that you're writing in front of it? Exactly. How do you go from the average sale price being 400 grand down to 300 grand? How does that happen?
That's a great question, and I think that would be worth conversing about. But I look, there are some ways that I could see that happening, right?
I see. I think we can, with deregulation, build our way out of that and
Yeah,
have our cake and eat it
yeah,
too, where the people that have all their equity and are happy and maybe even sitting on low interest rates get to keep that. But we add a new kind of product
sure.
that's
Sure.
affordable
Look,
for
I'm one of
people
those
that are not.
people sitting on like
Yeah.
whatever 1.8% interest rates and, bought, way early. I get it. But it's just saying, like, I think there's ways around it. But I will say this. If I have to sacrifice some home equity so that the nation can be saved, so that our young people can afford to buy a house, and we start growing as a country again, you know what? I'm willing to sacrifice some home equity, right? That's just me, right?
Yeah,
Because I think
you're saying something no one can argue against.
right, but what I'm saying is like I think we're trying to figure out how do we keep like more of the small shrinking pie. I think of what gives me so much hope is we can grow our way out of this, y'all.
For sure.
Like we're a great fucking country with some great people. Just get the government off our backs. We'll figure it out, right? And whether housing prices get slashed by 40% or somebody comes with a new financing product or technology comes along, who knows? Right? Who knows? Just get the government off our backs, and I think we'll figure it out. I really do. And then as a real estate industry, we should be advocating for that, right? Whatever that is, we should be advocating for some place where genuinely, like, I want my kids to be able to think about buying a home before they're
Very
40,
reasonable.
right? Or
Mhm.
I have to win a lottery before I can think about buying a home, or all the other ills and shit we have. Like that's it. We make it seem like cities that have these programs where they need a special program for teachers to be able to buy. I'm like, we got a problem in that city. That's a real effing problem, right? Like you should be able to buy a house if you're a teacher. And then just figure it out where you don't have to have some
But
special
why?
program. Just
Why
what?
should you be able to buy a house just because you're a teacher? Why should you be able to buy a house just because
It's
you're a
good for the
fireman?
country.
Not just because I'm saying,
No. I understand conceptually, but if you
yeah,
chose to go into a career that basically gave you a financial outcome that made it so that you couldn't say, for example, buy a house, that was your decision.
that was your decision. But that city, so say you're San Jose and your real estate prices are whatever, 1.2 million on average, maybe your teacher should be making more like $250,000 a year,
That's true too.
right?
Conceptually, that makes sense, obviously,
Right.
but
In
it,
other words, it's a price
yeah.
income ratio thing. Whereas your
Mhm.
teachers maybe shouldn't be making $45,000 a year and not have to live 3 hours away and commute into your wealthy multi-million dollar suburbs to go teach your wealthy ass children at some shitty public school. Maybe you should pay your teachers more so they can afford to live in the communities where they teach. And if that means that the wealthy residents of that community got to come up with more money, come up with more money. Do you know what I'm saying? It can all be fixed. And if you don't want to do that, liberalize building, like deregulate housing and let people put up some multifamily units so the price of homes get driven downwards, right? Like there's ways around it, right? But I don't want to, I don't know. And again, who the hell knows, man? Like I'm not an economist, I'm not a policymaker, but what I am is a fundamental believer in the free market, the American genius, and the fact that if you just get off our backs, we will sort this out.
And
Right?
you did
That's what
say
I believe.
something, you did say something earlier. I love how you bounced off, but I mean, a lot of this does have to do with really screwed up monetary policy.
Yes.
You
Yes.
know, just bonkers Mickey Mouse that's probably not going to cure itself anytime soon. $32 trillion worth of debt,
Correct.
you know, all these things. But yes,
Correct.
fundamentally, every study that's ever, and it is fascinating. There was a big movement, a cultural movement to try to dissuade people from wanting to be homeowners. And it was like all these
Right.
millennials, it seems like it was mostly millennials, don't ever buy a house, it's a shitty investment, all
Right.
these other
Right.
things. And
Right.
then you had these, in the same camp, all these people that were sort of, you know, championing the idea that real estate should somehow be socialized and be made free. And it's
Right.
a housing, you know, I think
Right.
Sanders even
Housing
said
is a
that.
human right and all that shit. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
these
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
But really, what is true, and then listeners, if you guys didn't know this, you should research it, or maybe Julie and I will do a podcast on it, is that every study that's ever been done has shown essentially a community that's mostly homeowners is 1,000 times more desirable. You know, people look after each other. There's less crime. The quality of
course.
life is better.
Of
And
course.
people forgot. I think they're disassociated with that. And maybe it's lack of inventory. Maybe it's interest rates. Maybe it's the payments are too high. Or maybe they've just been manipulated early on in their more formidable years into believing that housing shouldn't be part of the recipe for adult success.
Sure.
Who
Sure.
knows?
I don't think any of that. I think it's just the economic condition because our fiat system's broken, which then led to broken housing market. Because if you go and ask like some college kid, right, what's your vision? And I believe this. I think this has not changed since I was in college, right, 35 years ago. And it looks something like this. I'm going to graduate college. I'm going to get a job at a big city. I'm going to live that exciting, young, urban, like city life for a few years. And I'm going to meet somebody. We're going to get married. And then we're going to move to a condo. And then we're going to have a kid. And then we're going to get a, 3-bedroom house, some starter home. And then we're going to have more kids. And then my career will whatever. And then we're going to get our forever home, live there for 30 years. And then the kids will leave. And then we're going to sell it and then move into some retirement village. I don't think that has changed. I don't think Gen Z today, if you were to really ask them, like, if money were like, if you're going to be successful, like, what would you want? I don't think they're going to go, I want to rent a box for the rest of my life. I just don't buy it. I think they think, I'm going to rent a box for like a couple of years because I want to experience the exciting city life thing. And I don't want to be tied down, because who knows, maybe I'll like leave and go to Singapore and I'm going to get a job in Dubai. Cool, good for you. And then you're going to hit that point. It's like, yeah, it's time for me to settle down and start a family and buy a home. Nobody goes, it's time for me to settle down and live in the box. Like, I just don't buy it. And I think if we can make it economically possible for younger folks to have those thoughts, for working class people to have those thoughts, you know what? The country would be so much better.
100%.
So much better. Right? Because you're not going to allow like drug gangs to be running into your neighborhood if you're a homeowner in that neighborhood. You're just not,
Very true.
right? If you're in government housing, you're just a renter, then who gives a shit, right? It's one of those. So
Mhm. Yeah.
hopefully that's a message that we all can kind of get out to our neighbors, as real estate people. It's like, hey, if you own, you're gonna take care of shit. If you don't own, you're not. Like that's just fundamental human nature. So how about if we all own? Even if we have like apartment building, how about if we convert all that into condos, right? And then see what happens. Chance of what happens is your community will improve.
12 months from now, what are the three things that we're going to be talking about that like will surprise all of us in relation to housing? Like 12 months, what will be the things? Because so I want to share this with you, Rob, because Julie and I, 2021, we
Yeah,
drove all over the country, went to
yeah,
24 different states with our
yeah.
daughter, who she did not enjoy it. But that aside, so we are listening to you and Greg talk about the commission sharing lawsuits, and we had known about it for a while, the brewing of it, but we didn't realize. And you were throwing out all these, doomsday scenarios. And the thing is if anything, your doomsday scenarios were maybe a little too conservative, truthfully. I mean, but Julie and I were like debating as we were driving around, listening to you guys pontificate of all these, and like, oh, good Lord, why is nobody else talking about this?
Right.
And honestly, you were spot on. So
Oh,
you
thank
don't
you.
give yourself enough credit for predicting the future. And I know you like to rag on yourself for being wrong. But if you felt comfortable saying, if you do feel comfortable, 12
Yeah.
months from now, if we're looking back at the previous 12 months, rolling into 2026, what are the three things that are going to surprise us the most about housing?
I think I think the first on the list is going to be um, just how just how vibrant the housing industry is going to be 12 months from now, right?
Love it.
Like, because I do believe that I do think President Trump and Elon and some of the people around him are going to do their level best to deregulate and unleash the American economy. The very first place I think we see that is actually in housing because there's so much demand, right? So much demand, and so many young people are all this stuff. The builders, I think, are going to be like, it's time to build, baby. Like, I think the economic activity that will come from that might be what saves us from a depression or a recession. Like, so I think 12 months from now, we're going to be looking at going, we're building like more houses than we ever have, right? And it's not just like single family, it could be apartment building, it could be condo building. I think the amount of housing activity is going to blow our minds. So that's one. Um, Two, with respect to housing, I think we're going to be having a really, really serious conversation 12 months from now about the MLS, right? Which is a core infrastructure of the industry. And it is unrelated to the whole realtor thing. So I think that's two. The third, I suspect we're going to have a really, really serious conversation 12 months from now about brokerage business models,
Hmm.
right? Because I think all of the obsession around agents and commission and compensation, I think will be sort of settled by then. But I think the thing that's going to really raise up are the brokerage models that will work, right? In light of the new economy, the new sort of fundamentals of how we make money, in brokerage by agents helping people buy and sell, right? Because I'm not convinced that some of the models that work today will work in that new world, right?
Oh man, I cannot end the show today with just that because that's too compelling.
Well,
Uh,
here's the thing. You're gonna have to end it there because I don't know what is going to work, what is not going to work.
oh,
I think
okay.
we need to see the data come in from the market, especially of the spring market, to get a sense of what's going to work, what's not going to work.
I
We've already
certainly
seen a little bit that commissions have been compressed a little bit, right? Even in like 2 months. I think there was a Riz Media study that was
it's
done that
true.
shows that. Okay, let's give it the spring market and see what works, what doesn't. And some of the things that we think is going to happen, which is that the part-timers, the hobbyists, they're going to have a much harder time, right? Number one, getting clients, and number two, getting paid, right? Because let's say you were a hobbyist, you didn't bring anything to the table, nothing stops the listing agent from going, yeah, the compensation you're requesting, it's a no. You didn't do enough.
Mhm.
Do
It's
you know what I
true.
mean? Like, so
So
we
I'm
don't
gonna
know.
do you a favor. We're gonna so Rob and Greg will talk about this on this very topic. He's gonna ponder it on upcoming industry relations.
I can't
That's
wait
a
So
to
good
hear
here,
about
point.
it.
so if you want to know about what Rob thinks that surviving and thriving brokerage models are going to be, tune into industry relations, and you are welcome.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Tim.
Rob, thank you sincerely for your time. You were very generous,
Thanks for inviting me. This was really fun.
and I was looking for something not to like, but I honestly didn't find anything. So
Ah,
maybe.
give us some thought. Talk to Julie on your next 6 mile hike. It's like, we
There
really
we go.
didn't like this that he said. So, all
Well,
right.
great. Well, thank you for your time. Thank you for being so generous. We ran long, obviously, but I think it's an interesting
Yeah.
conversation for everyone to partake in.
Yeah.
And thank you again for being
Yes, thank
such
you.
honestly, I love your oftentimes dissenting voice from from the shadows because, really does, I think, give the industry reason to pause and say, well, who's this guy that's over here saying this? And even though you don't necessarily, like, we take that stance too, and it doesn't necessarily benefit us financially, but truthfully, it's the ethical thing to do.
Yeah.
And saying the ethical thing is always going to win the war at the end of the day because people are
That's
going
right.
to
I
remember
think
that
the
you did the
ethical
right thing.
thing ultimately is going to be the financially rewarding thing. I
Mhm.
believe that, like you can
That's our
only,
belief too.
right, in the long run. So, yeah.
Yep. Cool. Thank you,
Thank
Rob.
you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thanks, Julie. All right. Bye now.
Thanks. Bye-bye.